Hi, everyone. Thanks a million for joining us today. We're absolutely so grateful to these fantastic people for sharing their knowledge and time with us in a time of uncertainty. If you're joining us live, please do ask questions through the live chat. And if you're watching back and you still have questions, get in contact with the Grow Remote community, or you can find both Dee and Laurel on Twitter. Hi, everyone. Thanks a million for joining us today. We're absolutely so grateful. And of course, technical difficulties we're learning as we go. That's one of the things we wanted to say as well, is this has been put together very quickly. We wanted to get information out to people as fast as we could. Grow Remote ourselves, we're a totally voluntary nonprofit, but we do understand that people have a need for information, and we wanted to share that as quickly as we could. So first of all, I'd like to welcome Laurel Farrer all the way from the United States. Great to have you here, Laurel. She's been an amazing champion for us in Grow Remote and for the remote community for quite some time now, has worked with many top businesses and governments throughout the world in the area of remote, and we're so grateful to have you here today. And then Dee Coakley, a woman of our own nation here in Ireland, the co-founder and CEO of Boundless. They're doing amazing work with helping businesses to hire people anywhere, no matter where they're based. So I'm going to hand it over to the ladies now. They're going to give you some fantastic information, put your mind at rest, and make sure to get involved in the conversation today. Thank you.
Thank you. We're so excited to be here, and we're more excited to help. Remote work is a topic that has been growing in popularity for the past year or two, and it's there's been a lot of work for Dee and I to do, a lot of answering questions and advising leadership and giving training, and then all of a sudden here we are. So there is a lot of information that is being distributed, but there's even more questions. And so we want to make sure that we are creating as many centralized resources as possible for leaders like you to get the answers and the comfort that you need. Going to a flexibility model of work from anywhere or work from home is always a big change for a company. And then to do it so suddenly without adequate preparation and planning, it can be extremely stressful for management. It can be stressful economically. It can be stressful for the bottom line of your company. And so we really want to make sure that you have a safe space like this to answer all of your questions, to feel much more equipped as a business leader. So please ask your questions, fill up the queue. We'll get to as many as we can in this hour, and we're happy to do a follow-up session if needed. But ask all of the questions, and we'll do our best to answer, because I mean, frankly, the rule of thumb with remote work is that you just don't know what you don't know. And so we're happy to give you that future perspective of things that we wish that we had known when we got started as distributed leaders so many years ago. And Dee, you are the expert of experts on those really technical questions, the unsexy questions that nobody wants to ask about compliance and risk.
That's
and
my
stuff.
area.
Yeah. we specialize in the unsexy side of remote work.
Yeah. So I suppose this is as Laurel said, not exactly business as usual. So ordinarily, when speaking with leaders or managers involved in remote working or considering making the move to remote work, we would suggest to do that over a period of time with lots of planning and coaching of teams and management. Obviously, that's just not practical for many organizations this week that are having to make decisions very, very quickly. So today we're going to focus on advice given the current circumstances. So for everyone, doing the best with what you have right now, and hopefully, we can give some guidance that might help you all feel a little bit better and give you some support at this time that is very challenging for everyone involved.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're in the same boat. I mean, this is a stressful time for us too. Yeah. And, you know, our teams are located all over the world. And so there's stress and pressure for us as business leaders as well. So we really do feel a lot of empathy for what everyone's going through. And we're here to help. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. We want to maximize our time together and answer as many questions as possible. Not to be redundant, but please ask questions. Dee and I have a few here that we anticipated being asked, and so we'll just go through a couple of seed questions, if you will, just to get the conversation started and let the queue start filling up. And then also Rose, that you just met in the introduction, she's going to be facilitating questions as well and passing them along to us, so you can pop them in chat and in comments, and they should get to us. Okay, so Dee, you ready to get started?
I am indeed. Let's go.
Okay, so we've been expressing a lot of empathy and talking a lot about the emotions of this entire time right now. So let's start there and really discuss how we can best support our team members that are struggling with isolation and anxiety right now. I mean, the worst thing that we can do for people that are feeling panicked and stressed is to quarantine them and put them into an isolated environment where they're just going to be alone with their thoughts. So what can we do for team members that are in that status?
So I think a couple of the biggest challenges that we have right now is that people are feeling this very, very differently. So people's levels of anxiety are different, and what they're anxious about is very, very different. And for those of you with teams that are distributed across multiple countries, different governments are implementing different measures at different points in time. So that can be a little bit of a challenge to deal with all of that. We've had very much a changing situation here today in Ireland. In the last 2 hours or so, the government have advised that everyone work from home, that can work from home from tomorrow, and all schools, childcare facilities, universities are closing from tomorrow for the next couple of weeks. So we have a lot of parents trying to make decisions. We also have a lot of people who perhaps, in the country who haven't worked from home, who are trying to figure that out. And then in the meantime, in some other countries, other governments, guidance is different. So people are feeling anxious. Some people are feeling anxious, obviously, around the potential health situation, and people's personal situations are so different. So you may have some people on your team who are immunocompromised or who are caring for elderly relatives, or may have someone in their family they're concerned about. And then you'll also have other people who just struggle from isolation. They find it difficult being at home. The most important thing, I think, is to reassure people, which can be difficult if, as a manager or a senior leader, you're also feeling anxious yourself. But it is important to try and maintain the work communication as kind of a place of calm. People may need to talk and vent and express those anxieties, but I think it's probably important to manage, if people are particularly anxious, how they're communicating that to the rest of the team, and reminding people that other people may be seeing things differently at this point in time. So communication, as always, we'll say this throughout this whole hour, with remote work, communication is the most important thing, and it's something that has to be done very, very differently than it would be in the office. So in the office, if someone's having some personal problems or a bad time, it's very easy to say, let's grab a coffee, to be physically close to someone, give them a hug if they need it. This is a very, very different time and situation. So I think social contact, so communicating all of the facts and being very, very clear around your guidelines in terms of when people are to work from home, how long that might be if you have visibility over that, what the expectations are in terms of the equipment that they should have with them if they're bringing equipment home from the office, being clear about their work and how you will communicate. Those kind of very clear instructions, which we'll probably talk about a little bit more, are going to help reassure people and help people feel like there's some form of structure to the work that they're doing. But I think daily social check-ins, so myself, our team, we've just been having a chat saying we're probably going to book in a daily lunchtime check-in or daily coffee check-in where it's purely social. As a team that's very established with remote work, we view that as something very important. Every Monday we have a call where the only purpose of the call is to talk about what we all did at the weekend. And those kind of social social times, they really help with people who are feeling isolated or feeling a little bit lonely. They get to have those kind of the water cooler moments that you would have at the office, and having those diarized and scheduled helps people to know, I'm going to get to talk to my friends in the next couple of hours. I think it's important as well to give people the freedom to have ad hoc social check-ins with each other. That should probably be encouraged so that people feel like they have social contact and social communication challenges. Do you have anything else to add on isolation or anxiety, Laurel?
Yeah, no, I think you hit the nail on the head just about communication. That really is what it boils down to. And folks, if you're tired of hearing the word communication, buckle up, because you're just going to keep hearing it. In fact, one of my taglines that I always say is, in remote work, over communication is just communication, because this is your connection to the world, is what you say, what you type. And so all of your emotions, all of your productivity, everything needs to come through your written and verbal communication. And so I think that that's the greatest thing that you can do specifically for those team members that are feeling stressed or anxious, is just to communicate with them. In fact, I have 2 members of my own very small team that are quarantined right now. And so just this morning, I sent messages to them saying, you might be isolated, but you're not alone. We're here for you. We're keeping up with them in Slack all the time, and really making sure that they feel engaged and they feel remembered. And just because they're sitting alone in an office doesn't mean that they are truly disconnected. So yeah, just keep engaged with your team.
So another question that we have here now, which I think Laura will be very well positioned to answer: what are some quick or easy wins for making a smoother transition to remote working? So a lot of the people on the call today, they are people who are having to make decisions very, very quickly. They're not going to have time necessarily to invest in long range planning around this. What can they do over the next few days to ease this transition for their team?
Yeah, so this is a tricky question, because this change management process is what we specialize in. In fact, we have an entire brand of our consulting company just dedicated to this, called Ready for Remote, and that's all that we do, right? And in an ideal situation, our best product is when we facilitate this process through a sprint, and this takes 6 weeks, and there's all of these resources and engagements, and now it's like, we just got to get this done. So at a bare minimum, what I would recommend is that everyone do 2 things. Number 1 is to get a policy in place. That's going to make you legal, first of all, and we'll get more into the meat and bones of compliance and legality of remote work later. But in fact, I have a checklist. Rose, I'll pop this into the doc that we're using for questions, and you can share that with the audience. But it's just distribute consulting /remote/policy. That's a free checklist download, and you can start there. And a policy will do 2 things. Number 1, it will make you legal, like I said. But number 2, it facilitates those questions that you talked about earlier, Dee, about getting on the same page. Like, when do I need to be online? When do I not need to be online? What meetings am I still supposed to go to? Am I supposed to have a quiet environment, or am I okay to have my kid on my lap? Like, all of those questions that cause misunderstandings between workers and managers, and cause those eventual retractions of like, oh, this isn't working, we've got to pull the plug. Having the conversations to create the policy, that's what prevents that. So most of the time when I'm making policies, it's, yes, there's that legal and compliance side, but most of all, I think of myself as like a therapist. That's what I feel like anyway, that I'm like, just, okay, now what are your feelings? Okay, and what are your feelings? And can you agree to that? Like, that's the conversations that you need to be having. So start with the policy, number 1. And there's that free checklist for all of you to get started. But then number 2, get some training. If it's a webinar with your team, that's fine. If it is, if you're taking a course with a company like Workplaceless, that's a Grow Remote partner or whatever, just get some training, I beg of you, because that puts everybody on the same page of expectations. Again, the biggest remote work killer that sabotages the sustainability of a remote work policy is misaligned expectations. And so the more that you can get on the same page about what how to support each other, how to stay engaged, how to communicate in a virtual environment. All of that will help your team so immensely. Remote work isn't very different. Remote work is it's still work, right? Like that's the big secret of remote work, is everyone's like, we're working remotely. What do we do? It's like, no, it's still just work. Like, it's okay. It's not that different, but there are just enough subtle nuances that you need to be aware of and to adjust in order to make it successful. And again, you don't know what you don't know. And so it's really critical to get that training.
That's a really good point, that it's just work and it's still work. The piece that changes is probably styles of communication. The work that, as an organization, the goals that you have, the deliverables that you're trying to reach and follow through on, they probably don't change because you're remote working, but how you communicate and perform meetings is probably the key difference. I did have someone contact me yesterday, someone who's from a very large corporate. They've never worked remotely as a team before, and this person was asking me for recommendations for collaboration software, whiteboarding type tools. Mm-hmm. And my advice was, keep it simple. If your team are new to remote work, and if you're looking for some quick, easy wins and things you can do over the next few days, I wouldn't necessarily start trying to add complex tools that people haven't used before to try and do best practice remote working overnight. Keep it simple. Tools like Google Docs are amazing. Video chat, video chat is that's your friend. That's mm-hmm. you can do most of your work through video chat. And yeah, try not to get too complex on the tools. I would say keep it simple, at least for the first few days, and see where you go from there.
I agree. Remote working has, been gone by different names, but teleworking, telecommuting, it's been happening since the 70s. They didn't have Mural in the 70s, right? So Mural makes our lives easier now. But I personally, I'm not going to speak for Dee, but I personally come from an era of remote work before all of the cool tools. And we got by with just email and phone calls. And so don't overcomplicate it. Yes, there will be a time that if you continue to work remotely, that you can integrate tools like Mural, and your life, you're going to be so excited and think, oh, this is so great. This makes life so much easier. However, yes, if you try to just jump into the deep end all at the same time, you're at a higher risk for drowning. So just focus on staying engaged as a team and creating consistent communication for now. And then when you feel like that's stable, then you can start to add in some tools, but don't go crazy with multiple channels of change management at the same time. All right, so we've got some questions rolling in. Dee, do you want to keep going with the seeds, or should we start jumping into
let's dig into some of the questions. Challenges. We can always come back to the earlier ones.
I love it. Okay, so Jillian is asking, what are the best practices to recruit and to connect with those people who are working remotely from home to join a shared workspace, aside from selling the benefits, hosting open hours, etc.? So what are the best practices to recruit and connect with other people working from home?
Connecting with other people. So an organization like Grow Remote is absolutely fantastic for connecting people. So Grow Remote serves a purpose of connecting people locally in the area they're in. Right now, people probably won't be meeting up in real life, but it connects people across a much broader community. So it's really worth looking at the Grow Remote website and seeing the resources that they have on there. Other tools for connecting people, I don't know if you know of any good Slack groups or anything like that, Laurel.
Yeah, there's a bunch. So if you do some quick searches on your preferred social media platform, so there's Facebook groups, there's LinkedIn groups, there's also Slack communities. Some are for leadership and some are for general. So there's a great tech community called Remotive, and obviously Grow Remote community. There's also gosh, there's so many. There's one by Greg Kaplan that's for leadership specifically, which I know is our primary audience here. So if you want to be invited to that one, that's an invite only. Greg Kaplan, by the way, is the CEO of Remote Year. So you can contact me and I can get you an invite and share your information with Greg. But yeah, there's a lot, and I mean a lot out there. So just take your pick. LinkedIn is probably a really great place to start. And I can let the groups that I'm a member of know that you're coming. But yeah, that's especially for leadership. There's a lot of these back end questions of like OSHA standards. What does that look like? You know, that aren't really being discussed in Google searches. So it's great to be able to connect with other leaders that way.
And I see, sorry, I'm rereading Gillian's question now, and see she's asked specifically about recruiting and connecting people to join a shared workspace. I'm guessing she means a physical workspace.
Oh, like a virtual workspace.
Hours.
Oh, I misinterpreted that. I'm sorry, Jillian.
I don't know. I don't know if she means physical or virtual. She says a shared workspace, and she talks about hosting open hours. I know Grow Remote share information about hubs. So if it is a physical space that we're talking about, there is information on hubs at Grow Remote. I think right now a lot of people are probably working from home rather than gravitating towards physical spaces. Yeah,
so co-working spaces right now are obviously not your best option. I mean, it's a sensitive topic. And so if that's what you're referring to, just, you know, make that recommendation to your team per your own discretion. But if you're looking for like virtual workspace tools, Jillian, maybe like give us a follow-up, but like virtual workspace, I know we weren't going to make like specific tool recommendations, but the baseline of distributed teams, like if distributed teams have an office, that office is usually tools like Twist and Slack and Jira, things like that. So if we think of an office as a place where people congregate in order to collaborate on projects, that's what your office becomes. And so those are very cheap and affordable options that you can get started with, and they're very intuitive, so you can start learning them without a whole change management process. That's what you can start at a moment's notice. But if you want more clarification, Jillian, I feel like we kind of answered that in 3 different ways. So your bases might be covered, but if you want more information, let us know. But yeah, let's go on to the next one.
So what would you advise for large companies, circa 1,000 employees, who don't have the IT resources to go fully remote? And this is from Karen, and she says one of her clients only has IT capacity for 20% remote. I'll pass this to you in a second, Laurel, because I know you often advise much larger organizations, and my experiences with smaller teams. I heard of a really neat concept, and it wouldn't surprise me if Laurel's familiar with this one, but I hadn't heard of it until yesterday. An old friend of mine works for a bank. It's a small bank from elsewhere in Europe that has an office here in Dublin. And prior to the announcement by the government today, they had a situation where they had 3 teams, 3 cross-functional teams. This is not how this organization ordinarily works. This is a business continuity plan. So they were split into 3 teams: an office-based team, a work-from-home team, and a backup team, who at this point were also working from home. And because they're a bank, they have some security restrictions that mean that not all of the work currently can be done off premise. So they have some challenges around the fact that they have to have some people in the office. So what they've done is this office team, if they reach a point where they have a confirmed coronavirus case on the team, that team will all be moved to working from home. They will do a deep clean of the office, however long that takes. And then the work from home team are moved into the office. And then if they need to do that again, they have a backup team. And I just thought that was a really clever way of dealing with this. Certainly in terms of the team, it seemed like they were very clear on what was happening, and it meant that the business was able to continue despite being the type of business where people couldn't all work from home simultaneously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that is very common for the healthcare profession as well. So when there are what's called in the United States HIPAA standards, the private patient security regulations, in which the information about the patient has to be kept under certain environmental conditions in order to keep it safe, such as certain heights of walls and locked doors and things like that. And so, you know, how do you enforce that virtually? So this is a good time to bring up the hot and cold conversation of employee monitoring programs. So this is a sensitive topic because trust is absolutely critical in remote work. You need to be able to trust and have a higher level of emotional intelligence in distributed teams. So when you are monitoring employees, such as like keyboard activity tracking, that does not do anything for productivity. Most of the time it means that people, literally are putting a paperweight on their keyboard and it's typing while they go get coffee. You're not doing anything for productivity. So that is a very classic worst case scenario that we do see a lot. However, it can also be a really, really great thing for this example of healthcare, right? So if they can turn a webcam on and watch the employee in their working environment for the entire time that they're working. Now, that sounds like an invasion of privacy. However, if the employee agrees to it and says, yes, I understand that by agreeing to the fact that my home office fulfills the HIPAA standards in which the environment needs to be in order to, conform with compliance. So I agree to that, and I agree for the webcam to be on because I know that this is what allows me to work from home. Then why not? So it can be a slippery slope, and if people want to get deeper into that conversation, we can. But that's another thing to consider in terms of capacity and are we actually able to go remote? So Karen, to answer your question more specifically, again, we don't need to reinvent the wheel here, and the capacity to go remote can be as simple as just communicating via email and video call for the next 2 weeks. We don't necessarily have to build the entire infrastructure all over again. And when I'm advising large enterprise clients like GE and Microsoft and Abbott, that's where we're starting, is we don't really need to touch your infrastructure. Let's just start building the habits of communication and adopting the mentality of we can work from anywhere. So, we're all working right now from home a little bit, right? We're answering emails from home. We're catching up on phone calls on the train, stuff like that. So we're just figuring out how to do that a little bit better, use that as a baby step, and then once we're in not such a crisis mode, then we can talk about more widespread consistent change. So Karen, I'm happy to talk to you about that directly one-on-one, because enterprise consulting is something that I specialize in, and that's probably irrelevant to a lot of people here. But yeah, my general takeaway there would be, we don't need to go 0 to 60 here. Let's just focus on the basics, maintaining engagement and communication, and then we can baby step our way back into this.
So you brought up something there, Laurel, that I think may be on a lot of people's minds, particularly if they're new to remote work or new to managing remote teams. How do we ensure people are productive when they're working from home? And as you mentioned, it's a hot and cold topic. I think we can probably expand on this one a little bit. We could easily do a whole hour on
Dee and I get next 6 hours. I hope no one's going anywhere.
But I think also this is one that causes the most concern for people who are new to managing remote teams. Mm-hmm. And it's the one where your views start to shift to the greatest extent, and you start to see the world very, very differently once you've been working on a remote basis longer term. Mm-hmm. So yeah, how should people how should they approach this one?
Yes. Let's get into this. Roll our sleeves up. This is the big question, right? How will I know that my workers are working? How do I know that they're not just watching Netflix and playing with their kid or doing laundry? This is the number one concern of managers. So I'm really glad that you brought this up. So again, Dee and I could talk about this for literally 8 hours. However, we're going to consolidate this into just a couple of minutes. And here's the distilled version, is that when we shift our mindset and our productivity tracking software or methods to be more based on accomplishment than activity, that's where we see the success. So this is called results only work environment, or ROW, or results-based tracking. It has a lot of different names, and we don't need to go extreme and actually give this a label, but we do need to understand the premise of this is where the trust comes into play, that I'm not going to watch you doing your work. I will know that you have done it when you deliver it to me. So that's the big transition, and I know that that's hard, and I know that that's scary, and again, this is why we usually take 6 weeks to facilitate this change. But the more that you can, again, just baby step your way into that mentality of watching results instead of watching activity, that will make your life so much easier. The classic example that I give when I'm doing presentations is that, think of it as somebody washing my car, right? Like, I don't need to watch them wash my car to know that they did it. I don't really care if they washed it in the parking lot or in the garage. I don't really need to know what kind of soap they used. Like, that's up to them. And I trust them to do the job that I hired them to do. What I care about is my car ready at 5 o'clock when they told me to pick it up? And at that time, I will be able to tell if, whoa, this person knows what they're doing. They did a great job. I'm impressed with their results, and I'm going to continue to use them again in the future. I recognize that this is incredibly oversimplified for a very complex problem. So again, talk to Dee and I. We're happy to help you out on LinkedIn or on Twitter or whatever. But that is the premise of the solution. Do you agree, Dee?
Absolutely. And I think this one is more of a, I was going to say a psychological challenge, maybe an emotional challenge for managers and leaders than it is for workers or team members sometimes. There are a couple of techniques that you can very quickly and easily employ that may help here. I think be cognizant of the fact that this could be very challenging for you, but remote working really only works when there is trust and when you give that freedom to your workers to deliver. But a couple of strategies that can really help is doing what in the tech world, what we call a daily stand-up meeting. This comes from a tech development methodology used by software engineers, but it can be used by any kind of team. And it's particularly helpful in this kind of environment where people aren't used to being separated, where they're used to having this social connection each day. A quick check-in in the morning via video. It can be as simple as 15 minutes. The reason it's called a stand-up is because people generally stand up if they're in a physical office environment while doing this meeting. Reason for that being that then it's done a lot more quickly than if everyone settles down around a table. So quick check-in, same time every morning, video chat, everyone logs in, and a quick round robin of what everyone expects to achieve that day. It frames everyone's thinking for the day. As a manager or a leader, it should hopefully give you some assurance that your team are focused, they know what it is that they're going to work on. And the idea is that the following morning you check in, people quickly say if they had any challenges achieving what they needed to achieve yesterday, if there's anything that they need help with from anyone else on the team, and then once again, you talk about what you're going to deliver that day. That can really help. Something else that can be set up very, very quickly is having some form of tracker doc. If as a team you don't already do this, really simple spreadsheet, each person, what are the top 5 things you're working on right now? And then when you have your one-to-ones with your team members, which if you're not in the office, you will want to do probably at least once a week, depends on the nature of the work people are doing, you can refer to that tracker document and quickly work down the list, refresh the list for the following week. But it helps you as a manager feel a little more in control in terms of understanding how people, not necessarily how they're spending their time, but what it is they're aiming to deliver. And it keeps those people focused.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And I'll reiterate, just in case anybody missed it, that is not just for the tech world. So I don't come from tech myself yet. I've always had stand-ups with my teams. They can be daily, they can be weekly, but yeah, just having that past, present, future check. So again, it's what have you worked on since we last talked? What are you working on? What are your goals? And what are you feeling blocked on? And really just consolidating that conversation just to a couple of minutes each can make a really big difference. However, I'll also add and emphasize the importance of emotional intelligence during those conversations. It's easy to feel frazzled or just focused on productivity in those times. And if you're not really sensitive to your employees during those stand-ups, it can cause a lot of disaster and a really toxic culture. And so pay attention to them. If they're saying, oh, I don't know, like I'm blocked, I have a lot of questions, don't just say, oh, well, come on, like I need you to be productive. Take the time, say, let's talk about that later, and follow up with a better conversation. Use that as an opportunity to have a one-on-one temperature check with every single one of your team members every single day. It can be a really powerful tool for the productivity of your team, but it can also be a really powerful tool for the empathetic leadership of you as a manager. Okay, so we're getting a lot of questions, Dee, about tools. This is I mean, we can't avoid this, right? Everybody likes to talk shop. So let's talk about tools a little bit. And Rose, I did pop in another link to share with everybody. Again, this is a free resource from Ready for Remote, where we talk about tools, but let's talk about like the quick stack of most distributed teams and what they need in order to be successful. So the first one, Karen's asking about video chats. Here we are on Zoom. Yes, this is the gold standard. But for the sake of neutrality, we'll also include
other
Microsoft
video
Teams,
software tools are available.
Yeah, Blue Jeans. Yeah, like Zoom is it's the standard. We'll say that, but there are lots and lots of other ones, and I'll even say there are better ones, but Zoom is the standard.
I do see people, I will say in the field of work that I'm in, it tends to be, if people are sending me links, it's either Zoom or Google Hangouts. I don't see others, but that may be just the space that we're operating in. We're Zoom users. We're big fans. Find it to be a great tool. I think the most important thing though is that you have video and people are on video. That's more. If you were making the switch to remote due to emergency planning or business continuity, don't agonize over getting the best tools. Your time will be better spent figuring out how your team should communicate with each other, rather than which platforms they're communicating with each other on. So figuring out the cadence of communication, the style of communication, and documenting that and sharing that with your team. That's a better use of time than reviewing 30 different video tools and comparing them all. I would, with the tools, keep it simple. So, Zoom is the gold standard. The other tool, I know for many years now, the teams that I've worked with, we have lived in Slack all day, every day. Again, Microsoft Teams is another really popular version of similar technology. Instant messaging, essentially. When I first started working in tech, we used to use Skype chat. It was a very different experience many years ago. But the important thing is that your team have a method where they can reach each other via chat, where they can do kind of live chat and over and back, or where they can asynchronously communicate and leave messages to be read later. If you're a company that tends to rely on in-person conversations and email, I would suggest you will need chat functionality for this period while you're working from home. Email's useful, and depending on the nature of your company, you may need to use email. But for people to be able to bounce stuff off each other over and back, I think a chat to instant messaging tool is pretty important.
Yeah, I agree. So I wrote an article several years ago that summarized it this way. So there are 5 tools that every team needs. And again, we don't want you to get too focused on which brand of tool, because the anecdote that I always say is that a paintbrush is a tool, right? And but you're going to get very, very different results based on how you're trained to use it. So don't get too focused on what the tool is, just get focused on its functionality and how you're using it to keep your team engaged. So 5 tools. The first one is file storage, some type of cloud collaboration storage document of some kind. That can be Google Drive, that can be Dropbox, but somewhere where you can share files easily and ideally collaborate in them at the same time, to avoid multiple versions of the same document being downloaded in different places. So cloud file storage is number 1. Synchronous communication is number 2. So that can be platforms like Slack, Microsoft Teams, a place where your team can be communicating at the same time. Asynchronous communication is the 3rd one. So this can be email, this can be, I don't know, like my team and we use an app called Marco Polo for video asynchronous communication, but just somewhere where you're not in the same place at the same time, but still having a consolidated conversation and continuous conversation. So that's number 3. Task and project management is a 3rd one. This can be as simple as like Todoist or Trello or a spreadsheet, like you were saying, Dee, but or it can be an actual task management software like Asana or Workspace ONE or something like that.
Teamwork.
But just, yep, exactly. Somewhere where somebody understands they can log in and know what they're supposed to be working on. And then the 5th is that human element, that synchronous side that we were talking about, the extra synchronous, which is video conferencing. It is, a lot of companies are video off, but I'm going to tell you right now, if you try to manage a contingency plan with conference calls, you are going to be in a world of hurt. So get everybody in the habit of cameras on, video conferencing, and everybody will pay attention much better. There's going to be less overlap of like, oh, wait, did you say something? Oh, wait, did I say something? Wait, who's that? Oh, somebody's on mute. Like, oh my gosh, it's a nightmare. So we have the tools and technology, we might as well use them. So video conferencing is the last one. So those 5 tools are what I
add to that about the videos. I just can't say how important that is. Our business, we do spend a lot of time talking with people in more traditional industries, in the legal profession, in the accounting profession. A lot of people in those sectors haven't used video chat before, so they will phone in to our video call. So it ends up being me and 2 members of my team looking at each other, and then a phone symbol on the screen. If you or your team are not very experienced at using video chat, you probably don't realize what an awful experience that is for everyone else on the call. In almost all distributed teams, it's a rule. When you're on a call, turn on your video. In the same way that co-located at an office, if you're booked in for a meeting, you're expected to turn up and be in the room. On a video call, you're expected to turn on your video. It's pretty important. I did see someone tweet this morning saying that in their organization, they'd just been sent around a message saying that clothing was mandatory for video calls. And as they pointed out, rules don't tend to get made until there's some kind of a problem. So I mentioned this to someone earlier, and we both had a couple of stories about people we knew where on video calls, people hadn't realized their videos were turned on, and they weren't fully clothed. So again, if people are new to video, make sure you can set up video conferencing tools. You can set them up so that by default, when people join, their video and audio is off, and they choose when to turn them on. It's up to people how they want to do it. That's I have my settings set on video so that everyone that joins a call with me, that's the experience they have. And
be aware of what's behind you too. I think, like, yes, I'm demonstrating this on purpose today. Like, if all else fails, just sit right in front of a blank wall and you're good to go. But be aware of what's behind you. I have seen, I'm going to write a book someday. I swear, like of all of the things that I have seen in people's backgrounds, it is astonishing and terrifying. Guys, this is a story for a different day. I have literally seen a corpse in somebody's background. Like this.
What?
I know. Like I'm just going to dangle that carrot of interest for you guys.
I'm definitely going to follow up with you to get that whole story some other time.
It's crazy, but I've seen like dirty underwear, and I've seen like, I just way too personal. I've seen like somebody's spouse sitting in their bed behind them. Like, I mean, it's just weird because you just get so zeroed in. Like I'm looking at the screen and I don't realize what's behind me. So just please be aware of what's behind you, and keep it professional. Please keep it professional. But yeah, well, that'll be a chat group. We'll talk about that another time. So moving on. Okay, we got a couple more great questions. So this one is talking about what information. Ooh, this is a good one. Dee, you ready? Okay. Mm-hmm. What information do managers miss out on if an employee is working from home that they would have if everyone was in the office?
That's actually a really good question. I mean, the common one that does come up, and we've talked about this, so I won't dwell on it for too long, but I think this is particularly important given the situation that we're in right now. The common one can be cues that someone is not doing well emotionally. Mm-hmm. When someone's on a video chat, they're quite brief, bite-sized opportunities for engagement, and people can appear fine. And particularly if someone is a little more introverted or they're not a very chatty person anyhow, sometimes we don't think a whole lot of it if someone is a little quieter. I think those of us working in remote working have all heard of stories where a team member, with hindsight, it seemed they were becoming disengaged, and then it turned out they were having mental health challenges, and it can be quite far along when management realize. Be really aware of that and be proactive about checking in with people. Also one-to-one. People often won't say if they're having a problem on a group chat. If you are line managing people, you need to make time to check in with them one-to-one. It seems very time consuming when you look at your calendar. If you manage a larger team, you look at your calendar and you think, oh my goodness, I have to book in these check-ins. They can be 15-minute check-ins. But think of it this way, when you're at an office, you probably do take that time to engage one-to-one, whether it's a 5-minute chat in the hallway, you're seeing people. So watch out for those kind of cues. The other thing, other than people's general mental health and well-being, can be how people are coping with their workload, how they're feeling about the work that they're working on or projects that they're working on. If they're energized or very engaged in a project, or if they're feeling a little overwhelmed. With remote work, you need to be a little more literal in your questioning of people about how they're getting on. So when you're checking in on people's deliverables, we talked already about setting clear goals for people in terms of what they need to deliver and what they're working on. It is worth checking in with people and asking how they're coping with workload and with perhaps new working practices. Again, it's over communication. You can't rely on cues or observing people's mood. Anything else you think that we should add there, Laurel?
No, I completely agree that it's just so easy to go invisible when it's the instinct to go invisible when something's going wrong, and it's so easy to go invisible when you're working virtually. So it's really critical that you're watching for those cues, making sure that everyone's staying engaged so that you understand how they're feeling, what they have questions on, etc. And I also want to maybe address the elephant in the room of there probably are some managers that are watching this saying like, this sounds like a lot of work, and it is. So how we balance out this new workload of constantly checking in with all of your team members and over communicating with them is that when you take out all of the active supervision that you're used to in a traditional office environment, it clears up a lot of bandwidth for this virtual communication and collaboration. So again, that's that results-based tracking, that you don't have to spend your time watching them produce the work, you can take your hands off during that phase and instead just collaborate and communicate and keep that engagement high.
We don't have very long left. The time is flying. The time is flying.
So let's see. Maria will answer your question really quickly. You said, how often do you check in, Dee, with your team on how they're coping? It sounds like you're doing it about once a day plus once a week, right?
Yeah, we do once a day with most of the team. I would see most people once a day at some stage throughout the day. But I have one-to-one check-ins once a week where it's asking people how they are, looking at what they're working on and how they're progressing with what they're working on, quite focused, usually 45 minutes to an hour, and I do that with everyone on the team. If someone's quite new, for people, for their first few weeks, I do that twice a week.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And that's the same thing I do with my team and the protocol that I instill in all my clients. So I think that that's a safe standard. So last question, just with our last couple of minutes, and then we'll wrap up at 5:02, or by 5:02, I should say. Karen's last question is, what tips do you recommend for employers to ensure GDPR compliance when working from home? Dee, this is your sweet spot, so take it away.
So in terms of GDPR compliance, I think a lot of it involves following the usual protocols. Now, this is assuming you're working in an organization where people can ordinarily access data via secure cloud-based systems. And I'm saying secure because hopefully if you're appropriately operating your GDPR regulations, you will be using secure systems in any event. So I give the example of someone working at a bank earlier. There will be some organizations where some people may need to be on premise, where you're accessing confidential data, particularly customer data, or very, very sensitive information. We're an organization where this applies. You need to be checking with experts to make sure that you have the right security restrictions around who can access information. I may be applying broad brushstrokes here, but generally the rules that apply in your office should apply when people are working from home also. I wouldn't imagine that should change very, very significantly. Where you may have challenges is if you are forced to have people working from home, you have absolutely no choice. And there are forms of data that are currently only available to people on premise at your office. That's really more of a specialist technology challenge. And you probably will need to speak to a security expert or someone from your IT team who will resolve that issue for you.
Perfect. Love it. Okay, so we're getting a few more questions now that we're in our home stretch. Oh. So how about we close up with like a speed round, do you think?
Yep, do it.
Okay, so first one, Karen, as we are now being forced to work from home, how do we deal with people who don't like it or hate being alone or resistant to it? My quick answer there is a bit insensitive, but it is the fact that, again, in remote work, soft skills are much more important, one of those being proactivity. So that is something that I would turn around back on the worker and say, I'm so sorry that you don't like this. What can we do to solve the problem? And we can think creatively and use that, number one, as practice to start collaborating virtually, but then two, to start independent problem solving. Like, I'm not sitting next to you anymore. You got to figure out how to solve problems by yourself. So what are you going to do? Like, are you going to start a casual Slack channel? Are you going to maybe join a social hobby group? Like, what are you going to do to make this better for yourself? Dee, what do you think? What's your quick answer?
I would say listen to them. Sometimes when people are unhappy like that, all they want in the world is to be able to vent and someone on the other end of the video screen to sit there and go, top tip.
Totally. Absolutely. All right. Next one is, what was your biggest learn when you first started working from home? What do you think, Dee?
I think it's the hygiene stuff we talked about around video, and also regularity. The regularity. You need to have these check-ins and meetings far more often than you would have thought.
And mine would be self-care and self-management. I am the personality type that really tends to zero in and hyper-focus on my work. And so it's so easy for me to work 8, 9, 12-hour stretches without eating, without showering, without exercising. And that's not sustainable. Also, on the other end of wandering around the house just snacking and not getting any work done, that's also not successful. So really learn how to manage yourself and be successful in an autonomous environment. Be in control of your time, your tasks, and your energy. That's my rule of thumb. Next is, do you get your teams to pay towards office equipment and setup at home?
So yeah, what we do is everyone has a virtual payment card. Our team are distributed in different countries. Everyone has a virtual payment card. When they need something, they check in with someone on our finance team. That person loads up the card for them. They buy what they need themselves. I've tried doing this in a centralized way before. And there are some services out there that support with that. It's far more challenging when it's centralized. When you let people take care of it themselves, they get what they really want. They arrange the delivery for a day. They know they're going to be there to receive it. Yeah, and that can be set up overnight, very quick and easy. These prepaid debit card companies, yeah, it's a simple solution.
Yeah, and before everybody gets their hopes up and thinking, oh, my employer is going to start paying for my internet, let me set a realistic expectation of what we see across the board. So yes, a lot of fully distributed companies do contribute to office expenses for home offices. However, hybrid teams usually do not, because they are of the valid mindset that if I'm paying for offices, real estate and a desk in an urban environment or in an office, I'm not going to pay for another one in a different location. So it's not the standard yet for most businesses unless you are 100% full-time, but it is something that you can negotiate eventually. Maybe not right now. It's a sensitive topic.
Something worth knowing for this audience, because I think a lot of this audience are probably based in Ireland. In the Republic of Ireland, the government, the revenue, the tax office, does allow a monthly stipend for e-workers. And I think in the current situation, my expectation would be that they may consider these people temporary e-workers. You might want to look into that, but they will allow, it's somewhere between 40 and 50 euro per month per employee that you can just pay as a tax-free payment, and that's to cover things like Wi-Fi or phone or whatever tools they need to use.
Absolutely. And then last but not least,
you don't need receipts for that.
Yeah. Do you guys do ergonomic assessments on home workers? Do you provide that at Boundless, Dee?
It's a little difficult because our people are spread across a number of countries. It's something we're hoping to bring in. It's difficult to coordinate in different locations. But what we are doing is we are getting recommendations for local people that can come out and support people in each of the countries that they're based in. It's something we'll be looking into on behalf of our customers as well.
Yeah, and fantastic. And I think that's a great lead in to say, if you have questions about those human resource risks and compliance and questions like that about taxation, contact Dee, follow up with her. Again, we are here to help. We have been having these conversations with the world for several years, and now we're happy to, nothing's going to change about our transparency now that the world is in crisis. In fact, it's even going to become more so. So if you have questions about that, contact Dee. If you have questions,
you'll find me at Dee Coakley, DeeCoakley on Twitter. Also worth mentioning that we're going to publish an article later today titled "A First Aid Kit for Remote Newbies." So we will post the link in this channel on YouTube. We'll also share it via the Boundless_HQ Twitter handle, and we'll be sharing it on LinkedIn. So you'll be able to access that.
Love it. And then if you have questions about leadership, about change management, about operational infrastructure, all of those questions, they can go to me and my team at Distribute Consulting, which is just distributeconsulting.com. A lot of the specifically change management resources that I manage or that I mentioned are under our sub-brand, which is readyforremote.com. And we're happy to answer your questions. Again, Laurel Farrer is LaurelFarrer. I'm the only one, so it's pretty easy to find me on LinkedIn and on Twitter, and I welcome your questions. Otherwise, good luck. Please, please stay safe out there. We are really hoping that you and your families, your teams, and your businesses can all stay safe and healthy during this time of crisis.
Best of luck, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Thank you, Laura.
Thanks, Dee. Good to see you as always.
Bye.
Bye.